I'll call this meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Stewart. I'm the mayor, and we're convening a regular council meeting. I want to open tonight. You'll see council wearing purple ribbon or pins with purple ribbon on them. I've got some purple on my tie and stuff. And it's because today we're celebrating the 2014 National Victims of Crime Awareness Week from April 6th to 12th. And in recognition of that, Coquitlam RCMP will be rolling out their Purple Ribbon campaign. Purple Ribbon campaign is intended to bring awareness for victims' issues and the programs, services, and laws in place to assist them. In addition to tying purple ribbons on police cruisers and most police officers wearing purple ribbon pins, Victim Services will also be hosting a free seminar for the public on April 10th called Surviving Major Life Changes and coordinating special geocache activities in the Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam areas. The key messages of the campaign would be that victims have rights and that victims are not alone. My own family has had the opportunity to benefit from the services of our victims services people here at Coquitlam Detachment, and on behalf of all of council, we want to stand in solidarity with Victim Services Unit in supporting victims of crime by wearing purple ribbon pins during this week, National Victims of Crime Awareness Week. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item on the agenda is the minutes of the public hearing held on Monday, March 31st. Recommendation that these minutes be approved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I noticed that when we had the petition that's signed by 200 some odd people, that it's blanked out. Their phone numbers and their signatures are blanked out to the council members. And I know that you may have a privacy problem, but certainly to the council members, I for one glanced at it, and just briefly. And I'd like to get a copy with the addresses and their phone numbers and everything else on it, because to me, many, I'm not saying that it happened in here, but some years ago, there was some...
Perhaps we can get an answer from that. This is the public agenda, or public minutes. Obviously, the public minutes have different rules associated with freedom of information. Yeah. Mr. Clerk.
Councillor Sikora is correct in the petition for the rezoning of 520 Como Lake, as well as some other items that you will find. We do now tend to block out the phone numbers and email addresses in particular. We will leave address information because we figure it's important in terms of the proximity to the area, but we receive a number of inquiries from people who are concerned because this is posted on our internet site. People now have electronic security measures that they do. They Google themselves once a year, and we get a number of inquiries, and this has become an increasingly common practice in many clerks' offices. We can absolutely provide one to a member of council. It's just that the electronic version that we are providing on our site has them blacked out in the way that they are before you. And I think the part of it is many of the people who collect these signatures don't have the expertise in order to properly set up informed consent of those who they are soliciting the signatures from. So you would notice with the city one, we would put a privacy impact statement saying this information will be collected, it will be put on the web, and it will be part of a public report. Those in the public who collect such petitions don't do that, and thus not all of these people have given informed consent. So that's why we do it, to manage their privacy.
Now, there would normally be a statement in the header of the document saying, I hereby give my consent.
Absolutely. When you see the public comment forms that the city helps prepare, there's always that privacy disclaimer at the bottom of a page.
Good.
But we can absolutely provide it to a member of council.
So that means that we can get the copies then. Is that what it is?
No, you said we
can get the copies? Okay, so yep. I'd hope that in my blue bag next Thursday we'll have a copy of it. Also, I'd hope that it come out a lot clearer than some of these deals, because page 8 and 10 of your document here, I'll tell you, it's not even worthwhile looking at. On page 8, you can hardly you can't read anything except a few names down the bottom, and page 10 the same way. It's very blurry, and I don't know whether it came out that blurry on original one or not. So
we are a little bit at the mercy of the quality of the documents that are submitted to us. The only I guess it would be word of warning or caution, I guess is a better word, for any member of council seeking the contact information. This item remains at third reading, and thus we really shouldn't be having contact with people on the public hearing item.
And I'll tell you why I'm asking. The fact is, I glanced through it briefly, like every council member did, but some years ago, there was accusation that one person signed 15 different names.
We don't.
And signed it themselves, and a lot of cell numbers. And the cell number, I could be going to Chilliwack, signing my name and address in Chilliwack with my cell number. They wouldn't know that I live in Coquitlam, because my cell number is a 604 cell number. So those are things that, you know what, it's good to look at, to really think about what's really happening, okay? I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this petition.
You'll get a copy. Yep, you'll get a copy for whatever purpose you want to use it for. Okay, Councillor Nicholson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to go on record as I have no desire to kill any more trees. I don't need a copy of this, and I would suggest the clerk make it available to those who wish it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, for whatever purpose.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk. Sorry. Actually, that was at first and second. All in favor of the minutes. All opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, April 1st. The recommendation is that these minutes be approved.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship and members of council, we previously had a delegation scheduled from the Crossroads Hospice Society in their 2014 hike for hospice, but this has been deferred at the request of the applicant. So we will move now forward to item 4.
Okay.
Item 4 concerns an OCP and rezoning amendment applications for a proposed one-family residential subdivision for a surplus portion of 1595 Regan Avenue. This is the Parkland Elementary School. This is bylaws 4404 and 4405. The three-part recommendation from staff is to give first reading to City of Coquitlam Citywide Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4404, first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4405, and refer these two bylaws to public hearing.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, just in anticipation of information that we might need or we can expect to get at the public hearing. I recall that several months ago there was a sort of an omnibus petition tabled at council about the general issue of disposition of excess school land. Would that petition form part of this this application now, or is that a separate thing, or does some sort of judgment have to be made on that, whether it's applicable? Because it's a fairly substantial petition.
That was the petition that applied to
on it, but they're talking about a lot of different issues, or at least two different issues, and some of it was just the broad issues about the philosophy, I think. So does that form part of this package going forward? Does anybody want to answer?
No, apparently not.
No.
Any other questions? Mr. McIntyre. No, Mr. Gilbert.
I think there's, as Councillor O'Neill has rightly pointed out, the petition pertained to a number of different facets, both specific sites, because as you will recall, the Porter School site was the subject of much concern as well, and also the philosophy of whether school districts should be disposing of property in this way. Haven't gone back and look at that, and perhaps I can meet with my colleague in planning and development and we could take a look. And it's always available. It's part of the public record as it's been submitted previously, and whether we would consider it to be a submission to the public hearing or not, I'll have to get back to you on that. We'll take a look and see about its pertinence, because I think when you are bringing it forward for a site-specific single application, I'm not sure that the petition was necessarily crafted with just this one site in mind, but I haven't refreshed my memory of it in a while.
Okay. I've got my opinion on it, but I just wanted to make sure you're aware. I think that it is an issue that might come up at the public hearing, so you should think about it in advance and make a decision on it, and then we could laud it or criticize it as.
Well, and I think one of the determinations is obviously this has an OCP amendment element to it, and OCP amendments go through generally some consideration of an 879 type of thing, and we can think about this as early in ongoing consultation. So I think there's a link that we can make if we think that it's appropriate.
Thank you very much.
It might not be helpful, but my recollection was that the petition replied to 2 schools, but also included the words should not sell anything, sort of context, which obviously is somewhat related philosophically, as you said, to this, the implications behind this one. On the same point, you haven't given up yet?
Yes. So,
Go ahead, just a second. Go ahead.
So my question was really asked so we don't come up to this problem during the public hearing when somebody says, well, refer to a petition that maybe isn't now part of the package or that is part of the package, and we just need to understand what this petition is going forward, and that's the only reason, that's the main reason I asked. So you guys can make the hard decision, and we could make our decisions based on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, earlier today in committee, I asked a question about the fields, because there's 2 fields there that are, I think they're full-size soccer fields, but certainly the older kids do use them. And I'm just curious if those 2 fields are in fact maintained by the city, if that's a shared use agreement. I'm just wondering if we can get clarification on that.
Yes, through the chair, they are maintained by the city. It's part of the historic partnership with the school district. There's no specific joint use agreement per se on the site, but there's a historic partnership that does have the city as the responsible party to maintain the fields. We actually did do a capital improvement on the fields, and the school district does pay the city under that agreement for maintenance. But the component of the lands north of the fields, that site is fallow land. The city that is excluded from the partnership. In other words, the acreage calculation for the city's maintenance component excludes that land. That land has never been understood by Parks and Recreation as land that we have any designs on. It's been considered part of the school district lands. It is access to that partnership. And when we redid the fields, we put capital into the fields some years ago. That land was not improved. That's land that's the northern land has never been part of any understanding of parks as part of the park assets in this area.
Okay, so that part is not maintained by us, and in terms of field or field of play, that's outside of that area. And my next question is looking at the lane, and I appreciate the resident, and I guess it's the eastern resident, and the concerns around the tree. And I was up there, as I said, on the weekend. My kids were playing soccer there, so I went and I looked at that lane, and I'm just wondering, to go around that tree at 298, it means the lane actually comes down and around, and the full length. Are those lots that are now created, they're going to be deeper? Are they deeper than what we would normally find in that part of Coquitlam, or have they been made narrower to compensate for the depth? Mr. McIntyre, I'm guessing.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening. It is correct that they are deeper, but that is to take up that additional depth to account for the lane that's been offset slightly to the south. The lot widths plus the depth do exceed the minimum lot size in that zone, the RS3 zone. They're in range with a typical lot depth in that area. Particularly, I would think with housing along an arterial like Como Lake, it's kind of nice to have the extra setback in area for a little more setback from the road. I also know I think there's a little bit of a widening that's required along Como Lake, and I believe that they're going to go with a different approach with the sidewalk setback from the curb line with the grass boulevard too. So again, it helps and just give that little greater distance from the actual roadway to the lot and to the house.
That was my next question. Are we pulling the fronts back because of that to put in extra left turn lanes or right turn lane, or is there any sort of anticipated road improvements that we gain by pulling the curb back? Because my understanding is, reading the report, the sidewalk would be redone anyway, so there's an opportunity to do some road work. And is moving the lots back to facilitate that, or is it strictly to get around the neighbor's property there?
Through the chair, and perhaps I notice Ian's here, our Development Services Acting Manager, can maybe answer more specifically. Again, my understanding was there was a slight widening of the Como Lake through there to provide for the sidewalk being set back behind the curb with the grass boulevard. I don't believe there's any further road improvements planned in that area, but if Ian knows anything else, I'd welcome his comments.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, that is the plan, is to provide a separated sidewalk and boulevard improvements in the area, and the lots are not needing to be pulled back, as you referred to, into the lane to accommodate that. It's really associated with providing that road improvement with the separated sidewalk for pedestrian safety.
There'll be no change in the curb. It's just how the legal lot line falls, given the placement of the sidewalk.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And will this impact on that field of play? Because that is now going to be a little bit shallower than it was. Had the lane gone straight through, the fact that the lane has to sort of take that bend and come in, is that going to impact those fields? In other words, will it make it 3 feet short of having a legal-sized field? Is there any impact on the field?
Through the chair, we took a look at the plan relative to the distance from the fields to the proposed lane, and it's a minimum of about 12 meters from the existing fields to the lane, so they will not be affecting the fields.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hodge actually took part of my question. The question had been about the fields and that you had discussions. I do believe that the CFSA has been consulted on this, and I think they don't see any problems with the fields, but if you could have that information back to us for the public hearing, so I'll move this on to the public hearing. But if my recollection is convinced, I was at a meeting that they didn't feel it impacted any of the field of play, and they didn't have any problems with it, but I'd like to know that for fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
Thank you. Just in preparation for the public hearing, this land is on the bus route and will be easy access to the new SkyTrain station in Coquitlam. So I just was wanting to ask that if there have been other considerations for this land use, if you could share those in the report coming up for the public hearing, because there's also some rezoning questions about the property across the street as well. So I understand it's all single family right now, but I just would ask for the public hearing to have some information about what other considerations might fit there for the future.
Okay, and I've repeatedly raised other similar questions related to this land use. I'm not certain that single family is the highest and best use for this parcel. I don't even think it's the most appropriate use, so I'm still concerned about that. I want to hear from the public on that one as well, but it seems to me that there's some institutional uses where we have land in short supply, for which we have land, short supply of land, and I think we may want to consider some of those as well. Of course, the landowner has proposed a particular land use that's going to require a lot more servicing as well, so I think there might be some advantages to the landowner in this case to consider some other land uses, but I will support first reading. All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Next item, item 5, is a preliminary report on an application for zoning amendment bylaw 4477. This is for 1235 and 1237 Burke Mountain Street. The staff recommendations that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4477, and that bylaw 4477 be referred to public hearing.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through to Mr. McIntyre. We did another one, I think, did we not, similar to this? another daycare center? Or is this the same one coming forward now?
Mr. McIntyre.
Through the chair, yes, Your Worship, it's a little uncanny, but no, last week, Council may recall, staff had come forward with a text amendment, a proposed text amendment.
No, it wasn't that. About 6 months ago, last year sometime, there was another large daycare that's further north.
That's correct. There was one.
So this is the second. Okay, so this is the second one. And of course, we're right in the middle of single-family homes. And we have another large daycare at David and Coast Meridian.
That's correct.
Okay, so my question is to planning, because we have to keep rezoning for daycares. Is there any reason we need 3 large daycares in this neighborhood? I'd like to know if staff going on to public hearing has any information as to how many of these large facilities are appropriate in a given neighborhood.
I'm tempted to flippantly invite you to the Easter egg hunt next week because there's a lot of kids up there.
Well, there's a lot of kids up there, but some of them have stay-at-home moms and pops, and I just wonder, because we got a lot of neighborhoods, exactly. And we're in, people didn't count on having a larger and more intrusive building in their neighborhoods. So I'm just wondering, are we going to get one of these every month? At some point, there's got to be a point where we've saturated the market, so to speak, with these. And then what we'll be doing is getting pressured because there's not enough kids to turn it into something else. So that's my concern. I'd like to know if you have anything for the public hearing to hand me on that. Thank you.
Your Worship, that's a very interesting question. We'll have to take that away and have a look at it and see if we can come back with some observations for Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hodge.
So last week, we had a discussion on parking for daycares, and we decided to send that back to I guess, to staff to review. And my recollection was that, and this, the proponent of this particular daycare spoke on that other item, but we use this daycare as an example. And I believe it was 74 kids in the daycare would mean 11 staff, which meant 11 parking spots. And according to the new formula, 1 parking spot for every 10 students. And I think the total we figured as it would be about 19 parking spots. And I felt, well, okay, there comes a point which you don't need 8 drop-off spots, and that's probably too much pavement. However, this now is coming forward with just, I guess, the 11, I think 12, but that's a sort of a multi-use spot. But essentially, this one's coming through with the minimum number. So we've gone sort of from talking about, how much we should have, and now it's come forward. And I'm just wondering, how does that fit in? Does this now get ahead of that other bylaw? Is this now becomes non-conforming use if the other bylaw passes before this one, before this zoning?
Mr. McIntyre, with a smile on his face.
It's another good question, Your Worship. It boils down to the timing of the respective bylaw amendments. The text amendment, as Councillor Hodges noted, sent back to staff to go back, revisit it, and come back with recommendations to Council. And we will do that. That'll take a little while to come back. We're pretty busy right now, but we will get back with some report on that. In terms of the current application, it's now proceeding under the current zoning bylaw and the parking regulations. It would be going to a public hearing if supported by Council tonight. It would then go through a process, depending on Council support, ultimately to construction, and at the very end of the line, a business license application. I think, as I explained last week, that's really where they have to meet bylaw requirements. And so whatever the bylaw is in place at the time would be what they'd have to meet in terms of parking. Now, in this case here, if it's going forward with a site plan based on this number of parking stalls as what's been presented to Council, as what's been presented to the community, I would think that's what they would advocate as what their proposal entails. So. Unless the other bylaw was done in very short order and was now on the books, and then this would then have to comply with it, they would likely be subject to what is currently in the bylaw, and that's the parking that they're proposing to meet.
Right. Okay, and on the parking here, I'm just trying to sort of visualize the drop-off here. Assuming that 2 spots were not used by staff, looking at this diagram, it looks almost like the cars have to drive in and then back out onto the road. I was sort of visualizing more of a sort of a loop or a drive-through, so that you know, the kids, you know, you can pull over, unbuckle them out of the seat belts and take them in. And my concern is that, and I've heard on these projects, was, oh, no, don't worry, I'll put some cones out or we'll have a space out in the road. Well, we can't guarantee that, and so I'm just want to make sure that we're not anticipating using curbside parking in our parking counts here, because we can't count on parking off-site, and particularly on Burke Mountain, as Councillor Asmundson and myself and Councillor Reed, a number of us have been up there and looked around, and you can't guarantee that you're going to have curbside parking.
Your Worship, a couple of observations there. First, since the subject property, what's proposed to combine 2 interior lots, so there's a single road frontage. And my understanding is that because it's just a single frontage, adding another driveway, like sort of drive-through drop-off zone, would have taken both on-site parking and parking on the curb from the proposal. So that was not seen as desirable. So given that the single frontage and the configuration, you have a drive-in drop-off location. There are the 2 sites, on-street parking sites in front of the subject property. The applicant's consultants done an analysis looking at other potential on-street parking nearby in the neighborhood, and those are the numbers that they've submitted with their report. I know there's been a bit of back and forth on this. There was, in fact, some communication that came in today from the applicant's staff have looked at that. Again, I might turn to my colleague Ian, and if he has any other comments on that, because I know he was looking with staff at those parking numbers. But I don't know, Ian, anything else you'd add?
Through Your Worship, yeah, just in terms of off-site use of on-street parking, the applicant's consultant did identify that there would be a need for 10 spots in the morning period and 14 spots in the evening in terms of facilitating that drop-off and pick-up at peak times. So with the 12 spots on site, they have 1 spot on site. Also, the traffic operations has agreed to those 2 time-limited spots on the frontage of the proposed development. So that provides for 3. But there is then, you know, a number of other drop-off and pickup activities that are going to be occurring that are not necessarily housed. You know, while achieving our zoning bylaw requirement of 11 stalls, one stall per employee.
Sorry, did I hear that we're going to actually create on-street parking from either with like 10 minutes or just stopping, no parking, but stopping only? Is that what we're anticipating doing?
Your Worship, just to clarify, on the frontage of the development site, we are looking at providing time-limited parking for the drop-off and pickup for 2 stalls just on the frontage of the actual site.
Yeah, I'm just afraid we've had residents asking for parking restrictions, and I'd be concerned that we'd be opening up a whole issue on Burke Mountain if we started doing that. I think we may hear more about that at the public hearing, but at this point I was just trying to sort of count stalls, and I saw, I think, 11 plus a 12th one that was there but not on garbage day, or I think I said there was maybe some issue with that one, but I do have significant concerns about the number of spots parking and how we're going to sort of move traffic in and out of there, given that it is in Burke Mountain, and we know we have issues with parking in small lots. So I didn't support going to something like 19, but I think that we've really got to make sure we've got the parking straightened out before we take this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, I'm going to be echoing something of what Councillor Hodge has said, is that we went from a 19 to a 12, which is a bare minimum, and we're counting. My biggest point was Mr. Hodge has said about I don't support the 2 time-limited spots on the street out there. While there may be when people leave to work and back, there's during the evenings and early mornings, almost all street parking's taken up in that area, and it's at a premium, and you get different changes, a lot of rental with secondary suites all throughout these areas. You get different movements, and I think if we open up this thing, we're going to say, because Councillor Hodge is right, if we're going to say time limit parking for these people, there's a lot of issues up there, and you know, a lot of people trying to reserve their own. We've had fights and issues up there already about that. So I look at this proposal, and like Mr. Hodge, I think there needs to be an in and out, or I think there needs to be, maybe the site's too constrained for what we need. I think there should be probably 14 or 15 stalls in there for proper drop-off on site. So that would be my one comment through to staff. And I will say, and I thank Councillor Reid for raising the issue about, do we have a plan or an idea of how many daycares would service the population up there? Because the daycare that we just passed was at Kingston and Princeton. It was a large one for about 75 or 80 kids. We also have a daycare above the 7-Eleven at David and Coast Meridian. And there's one other one operating, and I forget the address. So this would be about, this is the fourth one up there. Now there's a growing population. There is a lot younger people up there. But I think to Councillor Reid's idea, I think from a city's perspective, we should also be looking at, now from Kingston and Princeton down to Burke Mountain's a long distance, but we should also be looking at, if we're going to allow daycares, what's the proper distance, where should they be? If we're having schools, a lot of schools now are having daycares within the school grounds, so if we're going to have that in there and have daycares, which is a better situation, isn't there a daycare at Lee Elementary? They lost the space. They lost the space? Okay. But those type of issues, because we've had those buildings built on other school sites for daycare. So I'll send this to public hearing, but those are some of the questions. And I'd like to have, I know we got the information from the proponent about the traffic. For the public hearing, I want to be able to see your analysis of that and the other analysis I'd like to see on this, just to give us that information. But those are some of my concerns moving forward. I'll move it to public hearing and hear what the public has to say at public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Askinson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, when I listen to the conversation that's going around this table, it makes me a little concerned. Number one, it's not city money that's going into this development. It's a private. People are investing their money and going to open up private school. I'm sure that they did the research to say that there's going to be enough kids in there that they can have the private school. For me, anybody wants to open up a daycare or any other kind of business, they have a right to make money and they have a right to go broke. I don't think for 1 minute that I should start dictating in this city how many Safeways there should be in this city, how many Save-On Foods there should be in this city, how many restaurants there should be in this city. It's none of my business. To me, if I think that the property fits and it's going to be a good development and the parking is there and everything else, I'm all for it. I have no problem with it. But I think for 1 minute for us to say, well, as a sitting councilor in here, how do I know? How can I possibly judge? The fact is that there's going to be too many daycares. You know, how can I say? I can't say it. So let's hear at the public hearing. You can ask all the questions you want, but I certainly support the public hearing. And I hope we get away from this business of dictating how many businesses we should have in this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
I echo Councillor Sikora's thoughts about, these people have done their research. You're not going to invest $1.5 million or $2 million if you don't think there's going to be a demand there. My question is, I went up and looked at the site, and the whole east side of Burke Mountain Road is townhouses now. What can be built on the west side of it across from the property? Because there's the stream, and I'm just not sure about the stream setbacks, and I know it's got a designation there, but realistically, what can be built on that side of the road?
Your Worship, the attachment 3 actually shows the official committee plan designations. So it's a combination of a single family in the balance of the neighborhood, aside from the townhouse site to the south and the subject property. So
but realistically, there's room for the like right across the street from that daycare. There would be room with the stream.
Your Worship, I haven't been out there for a while. I will go before the public hearing. I know there are some tight sites in that area. We dealt with one, council did a year or two back, but the lands are designated for single-family residential, so if there's sufficient area outside the water course and the riparian area, it would be for a single-family lot, but we'll check into that before the public hearing.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that would probably have a big impact on the available parking, you know, if nothing could be built on that side of the road, or if very limited, there's limited building on that side. Below the site where the townhouses are, I'm assuming a lot of residents from the townhouses will still park on that road, but I'm also assuming that during drop-off and pickup time, a number of the people that would park there overnight would probably be gone as well. Is that safe to assume? Anybody? Maybe for Ian? I don't know.
Yeah, so presented in the report on page 4 is some numbers relative to findings that the consultant, the applicant's consultant found when they went out and did some parking counts in the area. They also estimated future growth of parking in the area as the area builds out. So in summary, it indicates that there would be an estimated 19 vacant spaces on street in the morning and 27 vacant spaces in the evening, even after full build out of the area. And that, I think that was within a 200-meter radius of the development site.
And I read that, and I'm just trying to validate it because it just seems to me that there could be more parking in this area than traditionally on Burke Mountain. So just wanted to check on that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it's all about the parking. And people can make their own decisions about whether to invest. When I look at the adjacent on-street parking, a lot of it is adjacent that way. And I've taken small children to daycare quite a long time ago. And most parents don't want to walk those little children very far. They want to get it done as quickly as they can. I think any on-street parking that's more than, I don't know, 75 or 80 feet from the driveway is not really going to be useful in supplying and servicing the drop-offs. The drop-offs, though, are more likely to go into the parking lot, and that's, frankly, regardless of the number of stalls, I have a real problem with the parking lot. I think it may come very close to challenging Como Lake Village as the most challenging parking lot to get in and out of. To look at that design of parking lot, which is not too different from a typical 7-Eleven, and think of it as having a whole lot of kids walking across the parking lot while people are backing into each other, there's just always kind of the city manager to lighten things up for us. And I think I've made my point. I think we need adequate parking. We need it well designed. I think if the proponent were to come to the public hearing, and I'm more than happy to send it to public hearing, if the proponent were to come and tell us how they propose to solve these issues and provide safe drop-off, safe and convenient drop-off for their potential customers, I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll echo those. This is only about parking. I don't have any interest in weighing in on the supply and demand of daycare services. We do weigh in occasionally on the supply and demand of a particular kind of service. We call them undesirable businesses. But I think the worst thing that could happen if we have too many daycares is we'd have a whole bunch of well-supervised children running around our communities. So I'm fine with this. The parking still causes me challenges, and I flipped to something called Attachment 7. I'll ask it here, although I'm hopeful that the answer here will enlighten me for the public hearing, because it shows that the streets marked in orange are only wide enough for parking to be on one side, and we permit parking on both sides. I don't know how we do that. Okay. Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, a staff person will go out there and have a look and confirm the condition of the streets. I suspect that's the case, existing condition versus the ultimate, but we will find out just what the road sections are, take some pictures, figure out what is available immediately and in the general neighborhood.
Councillor Asman and I sort of collaborated in that it might be that only half the street is built at this point, but it isn't clear. I recognize this isn't a staff document, this is the traffic consultant study that points that out, but in the end this decision will be made or to go ahead or not, probably because of parking. So, in my opinion. Seeing no one else, the question is first reading and a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Hodge is opposed. The motion carries.
Next item is item 6. It's a zoning bylaw text amendment to the Part 5 general regulations introducing multifamily and commercial recycling requirements. This is bylaw 4442. Recommendation before you from staff is that council give first reading to see Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4442, and that this bylaw be referred to public hearing. But in addition, and I'll ask the general manager of planning and development to speak to this, staff are requesting additional notification.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Your Worship. What we'd like to do is with the second recommendation, if with Council's indulgence, we'd like to have that also specifically referred to the Urban Development Institute. There was some discussion with UDI about a year ago. There's been correspondence we've received that I was recently reminded of. It's referred to in the report, but I just would like for the city just to close the loop with UDI on this. So we just can't go and arbitrarily send it to the UDI. It needs to be part of the recommendation. So if council would go along with that, it's be referred to public hearing along with being sent specifically to UDI.
Okay. The motion, if it's moved and seconded, then I'm going to take as that it also be referred to UDI. Does anyone move that? Councillor Asmussen? Seconded? Second. Seconded by Councillor Reid. Councillor Asmussen.
I like the report. I think it's going to help achieve the objectives of getting better recycling facilities within multifamily, and I also hope that with this, the organics that we're going to be picking up and wanting separated out of the can will be enhanced in this function. The one area I do want to talk about is outside the multifamily, and Councillor Hodge and I had the tour in North Vancouver, and what we would like to see, especially with our new garbage cans and new housing and throughout the city happening, to have, as we saw by a garage where the wall is indented and areas to park your garbage cans secured out of the way. And I would like us in our single families, we've talked about this for a while, but we really haven't seen much. Maybe it's not part of the building code, but maybe a policy statement coming back that we can encourage people dealing single family homes. It gets around the same type of idea of proper space and areas for these things, and it's something we've raised, what would you say, about a year and a half, 2? Yeah, so I just want to re-highlight that.
Okay, and I'll just, for the information of council, the building code, of course, wouldn't be able to deal with it, but our own zoning bylaws might be able to, and we might be able to have policy suggestions, and I think Mr. McIntyre wants to weigh in on that.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm pleased that Councillor Asmussen raised this, because I suspected he would when I reviewed the report and went through and the subject of the report was about. So I did check with staff, and I was reminded that was one of the implementation steps in the Pioneer Creek Neighborhood Plan. So I reminded staff of that, and I will ask them to give that attention in the public hearing report, do a little more update on that, and to keep it on staff's radar to move ahead with that piece of work.
And it would be good to see that throughout the city, I think, especially when we saw our bear hazard report and our bear interactions throughout the city in the garbage. So I think that would be well used. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I was pleased to see in the report that there'd be no retroactivity involved in this, and B, that the rules that are being proposed don't go as far and as far-reaching as Metro was proposing, specifically to regarding loading area space and things like that, because you know, we look at these things from a city point of view, and under financial implications, we have this usual statement: there are no immediate financial impacts with this report. You know, if I'm a builder, I'm a buyer, I'm a developer, I look at this and I see, all in all, it's just another brick in the wall, another thing that adds another little bit to the cost of our most affordable type of market housing. You know, it's the condominium projects, it's the multiple family residences. And here we go again, putting another thing in here. We think we know best. Oh, so, you know, I've got problems with this. And the other thing I have, and it's just a little bit of a confusion that I have here about, here we're very anxious to kind of get in line with what Metro wants us to do with garbage and recycling and everything like that. Well, that's one hand. And on the other hand, what do we think about Metro's garbage and recycling and waste energy plans? And we're up in arms about a lot of this stuff. So I think we're being kind of two minds on this thing. And, oh yeah, you know, we want to encourage recycling, without a doubt. Oh yeah, you know, that's really good. Get the things recycled, and it cuts down on the garbage costs. It goes to the dumps, and that's a big problem, we know. And Lord knows we don't want to waste energy facility. But, you know, I don't think we have a cohesive way that we're moving forward with this. And I was of a mind to kind of just, you know, let this whole thing sit until the dust settles over all of the different aspects of our garbage and recycling. You know, there's a tremendous pushback now from many groups about the whole MMBC thing. Is the provincial government going to step back from that? And then what impact is that going to have? There's a lot of stuff that's still unresolved here. So I think that this is kind of premature. And as well, you know, the financial implications, another brick in the wall, another barrier, another brick in the barrier to affordable housing here, housing affordability. So I'll be opposing moving this forward.
Passionately, apparently.
Yeah, I guess so.
Councillor Wilson.
I got to follow that. I guess I'd rather live in a climate that we can live in rather than a house that I can afford. So I'll debate with you later how we recycle this stuff.
You can live in a tent, I guess.
You know, the occupant of that seat has for some time been opposed to you.
My question is more about the retrofits, and we're not going to require any retrofit this in any kind of major renovations. I guess what I'm wondering, though, is would we have any kind of guidelines for a major alteration on a building, or we just it's grandfathered, they don't have to do anything? Because it just seems to me that on the one hand, yeah, you don't want to make it too onerous, but on the other hand, you have an opportunity to guide the construction of some space.
Your Worship, I guess we're trying to find that balance point in terms of retroactively requiring it for retrofits. I think the one thing there to note, though, is with multifamily, usually the retrofits are pretty modest. It's, you know, things that get replaced over time, as opposed to a retrofit that could, you know, trigger additional space being needed. Commercial, it may be a different situation, because you do have redevelopment and expansion on commercial properties. I guess the thing I would point to, though, is identified in the report. We do have DP guidelines now. We've been addressing this for a little while. We haven't had the actual hard numbers in there saying, you know, this is the ratio, the amount of space, but there has been development permit guidelines trying to get at this, so they would still apply, and I think hopefully they would still have some benefit in that regard. And it's to, as new development or redevelopment, major redevelopment takes place on the site, that's where we see most of our activity anyways, and through that process, I think that's really the convenient time to get this additional space designed in there. It's that way too. It's more functional, logical in terms of the other areas around it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just wondering, you know, a lot of the older multifamily complexes, buildings have a lot more land usually, right, compared to what's being built now. And I'm just thinking that when a retrofit happens, it might not be that difficult to find some space to have one of these storage areas. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, when I look at this report, and it's, if this is true by Metro, they're saying they're aiming to divert by 70% by 2015. In 2020, they want to go to 80% recyclable. And if this is true, I'm wondering why are they talking about this incinerator that's going to cost $500 million for the taxpayers of these different communities. And also, I'll tell you what's going to happen, that they'll certainly be asking to bring garbage from out of province, probably from the United States, somewhere to feed this beast, this incinerator, which really puzzled me. Is this Metro's figures that you're quoting, or is this our figures you're quoting? Metro's figures. Well, I think you need, Mayor, you and Councilor Reid are on a board. I think you need to bring this to their attention at the next board meeting.
There's an idea. We should bring it up at a meeting.
We're the only two that are.
Well, yeah, but you should point out
there's
the
a
fact
couple
is,
of others.
here's the situation, 70 and 80%. So they certainly can't have some kind of business plan to want this incinerator that's going to cost $500 million plus. Guaranteed they'll be importing garbage from out of province and out of the United States and other place to feed this beast again. I'm going to mention it again. So I think you need to bring this attention to Metro, because frankly, I can tell you, there's people in this community that are so adamant about recycling, and our home is one of them. I'll tell you, there's nothing that I can throw in the garbage if I don't catch hell for it, because you know, it doesn't matter what it is. I have to take a look and see if it can be recycled. If it can, you know, opening up cans, you normally throw them in a recycling bin. Oh no, you have to take the label off and you got to wash the can out first. You know, that kind of deal. Those are kind of things that go on in my home. But so, you know, there's more and more people. They're the same way, are very adamant about recycling. And if you do anything else that's going to destroy them for wanting to recycle, we're going to have a problem in this community. So I think that we need to have a talk with Metro very much. Okay, thank you.
Well, Councillor Sikora,
I'm just giving you a little bit of work to do.
okay, I gotta. I mean, we've reported back to council repeatedly on this issue, because the Metro Vancouver, of course, has a plan in their solid waste management plan to build another incinerator, and we believe that the way to avoid an incinerator is to expand recycling. In fact, that's the way to avoid an awful lot of the expense that Metro Vancouver is going to incur, and that's to get up to 80% recycling. I think we can get there, but we can't get there if we don't tackle multifamily. Multifamily has been the big issue. And so Councillor O'Neill mentioned some lyrics of a Pink Floyd song. Well, there's a couple of other Pink Floyd songs like Breathe or Goodbye Blue Sky, and they both relate, of course, to the challenges associated with an incinerator in this airshed. And the way to get rid of it is to expand recycling, and the way to expand recycling is to allow multifamily residents to recycle more conveniently, more easily, and more cost-effectively. Indeed, more cost-effectively, and I'll move on because Councillor Reid, well, it won't be Councillor Reid yet, quite yet, it'll be Councillor Hodge.
I didn't know if the mayor was going to sing or if Councillor Sikora was going to take on the environmental cause, and I certainly appreciate Councillor O'Neill's concern for affordable housing. But at the end of the day, I think that really what we're talking about is we have to get our diversion rates up and we have to increase recycling. Good portion of what's not getting recycled is unfortunately coming from multifamily. And I've said before in other discussions on recycling, if we're going to get the diversion rates down by increasing recycling, we have to make recycling easy. And that's really what it comes down to. It's got to be easy, it's got to be efficient, it's got to be convenient for residents to use, and providing storage areas and something like this is going to make it more convenient, and I think at the end of the day that's going to increase our recycling. So I'm going to certainly support this moving forward. Thank you.
And Councillor Reid.
Notice I'm sitting quietly.
Yes, I noticed
after
that.
Councillor Sikora spoke. You know, for the last year or so, with senior staff, Mr. Steblin in particular, Councillor Nicholson, who sits on the Zero Waste Committee, the mayor and myself, and Mr. Steblin, the four of us, have been racking our brains on how to get a business case re-looked at, dealing with flow control, dealing with the sale of electricity out the other end, dealing with it all. And we've tried very hard to encourage other cities to ask for the same report, because we want to make sure that the path we've been going down for the last 10 years is still the path we should be going down. And we have been constantly harping on this for the last 2 months. I don't think that there is one meeting that one of us has not spoke up at. So we are doing our job. We're just hoping that we get results soon. Thank you.
And Councillor Nicholson from the Zero Waste Committee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, it did occur to me that as a member of the Zero Waste Committee, I really shouldn't sit here silently. In the interests of time, I will just say what she said. That's the way it is. Thank you.
I think that was another nail in your sorry, brick in the wall. Okay. This got moved. Okay. All in favor. All opposed. Councillor O'Neill is opposed. Another brick. Never.
I should have spoken longer.
The motion carries. Mr. Clerk.
Next item, item 7, is the proposed road cancellation application for city lands adjacent to 3505 David Avenue, Northeast Coquitlam. Staff recommendation that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw 4458, and that Bylaw 4458 be advertised in accordance with the Community Charter.
So moved. Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Zerillo. Councillor Zerillo, sorry, I mumbled that.
Yeah. I'm going to use a term that May uses quite a bit, and I quite like it. Can you just, through the chair, could city staff, just without planning ease lingo, please just let me know. I see it's a small portion with white on either side. Why is it that we need to cancel just this piece, and are the other two white pieces outside of the yellow still a roadway? Like, just in non-planning ease, in plain English, why do we need to do this today?
I'm sure Mr. McIntyre isn't offended, but Mr. McIntyre.
First, before I explain the particulars, just in general, what happened in Northeast Coquitlam? You go back 50, 60 years ago, there's all these lots, there's all these unopened road allowances. So the whole mountain was covered with lots and road allowances. The city inherited a lot of those road allowances. So you'll find throughout Northeast Coquitlam, where they haven't been sold or haven't been developed, there's these strips of land, unopened road allowances that we now have that we close off when we can. In this situation here, we can look into the details, but my suspicion would be if you look at attachment 2 and you see the cross section of the road allowance, I think the area to the west, that would be to the left-hand side, it has a remnant 1. To me, that would suggest that title has been raised to that portion. So title has been raised. That's the process. You go from a road allowance that has no title. The city applies to raise title. Basically, it gets a title in the land title office. We now have a fee simple property that we can roll in with our own property, or we can sell to development, or we can dedicate as park. So that's the first step in actually getting use of that land. So in this case here, we want to close the road allowance, raise title to it, then consolidate with our land. I think on the left-hand side of attachment 2, you'll see dotted in there are some road allowances. So those are probably conceptual road allowances. They haven't been precisely set yet, but we know generally in that area there's going to be a road allowance. So let's not close this portion of road just yet till we know exactly where that boundary is going to be. So this road can then go into that new road, then the balance that's not needed could then be closed at a subsequent date.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Could I just ask one more question? Why now? What made it show up today? Or could you even answer that?
Our department, Plan Development, works very closely with Strategic Initiatives, the city's lands manager, as the city lands are planned over time to be brought on market and so on. So what the city or Strategic Initiatives staff will do, they'll identify where these unopened road allowances exist. They'll go through our staff to go through the process of preparing the bylaw and so on to raise title. So they're doing this in anticipation and preparation for consolidating, creating larger parcels of city-owned land that would then be sold or developed or what have you.
Okay. So then I should ask the question, is this part of the land that's recently been sold? No, obviously not, because the city still owns it.
This is land to the east of Burke Mountain Creek, so yeah, we're over in an area where it's still under planning at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. No other questions? First 3 readings. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is a Type 3 amendment to the Regional Growth Strategy. It's adding board-accepted regional context statement features. The staff recommendations that Council support the proposed Type 3 amendment to add Metro Vancouver board-accepted regional context statement features to the RGS.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Yes, we're good at knocking off those RGS things quickly, aren't we?
Item 9 concerns the Parks, Recreation, and Culture 2014 project reprioritization. The 2-part recommendations that Council approve the reprioritization of the following Parks, Recreation, and Culture Services initiatives and corresponding 2014 business plan priorities. These are in the chart before you. And secondly, direct staff to bring forward funding requests for revised project priorities for Council consideration as part of the 2015 budget.
So moved. Second. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Reid.
Did you need help in redesigning the pool?
Your Worship, no, we will look into that situation.
It doesn't need a really deep end, just a nice pool. Thank you. Just thought I'd offer to help.
Yeah, it was quite a shallow question, but okay.
He's making a lot of waves.
Oh, the ripple effect. Councillor Hodge.
Just I'm curious, this doesn't cover obviously all the work we're doing. The Master Parks Plan is proceeding. It's not sort of listed as a priority. I thought I saw going back a ways that we were working on a strategy for the town center park. I'm just wondering, just as specific, I know we saw some concept plans at one point. I'm just wondering where that fits into the work plan.
Yes, Your Worship, we did bring forward recently a report on the town center plan. There's some updates on work underway there. The turf field, and there's some bleachers, et cetera, and some also some parking adjustments due to the overlay requirements of the evergreen construction. That update report did include some commentary around the fact that we do believe that we would like to do a broader plan of the town center park. Just there's growth, there's a new field, there's ongoing demands, and it's very successful, obviously our more successful park. So what we've indicated is, as part of the 2015 work plan, we will bring forward a work item which would be an actual plan project for the town center plan precinct. And we're thinking about the Poirier precinct as well. These are our major recreational precincts. We believe we need a little bit better strategy as to how organized the current assets there and the long-term needs in both those precincts. So we're looking at that as part of the next work plan. That's for 2015, which Council would see in the fall of this year.
Thank you. You answered my second question, which was Poirier as well, because I think that with the city growing the way it is and with demands and the success of what we've done, that I'd like to see a more in-depth strategy for both of those, and that's great that they're on the horizon for 2015. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is reprioritization. All in favor? Opposed?
Just hang on.
Carried with Councillor Zerillo still one. Councillor Zerillo, sorry.
Yeah,
let's back up. I didn't catch the vote.
Yeah, I wasn't very quick on my button there. So I see some things coming up, but I didn't see much going down, and I know that's always a challenge. I just wanted to ask specifically about the budget for Mundy Park Fieldhouse. I took a look on through some other reports. It seems that the activities that are going to go on there are slow pitch, one of the two fields for slow pitch for the seniors games, and then there will be some biking happening in Mundy Park. I'm just wondering, I'm not married to it, but I just wanted to put it on the table that, you know, does this really need to be an A priority for that? We have such other beautiful facilities in the city. We're going to have a new covered sports facility. We've got town center. We've got so much wonderful things going on. Is it really an A priority for the citizens of our city with their tax dollars to do this now, or maybe we should be waiting for the master plan? So just wanted your thoughts on that through the chair.
Yes, Your Worship. We did look at this. It's actually a priority that's been discussed for many years, and it seems to always be pushed back. It's come to a point where the building is in very, very poor shape. So it's now a combination of the fact that this building is in such a poor shape that we really do need to do something, and it's timely with the needs associated with the senior games. We believe we'll be looking at a very modest, we're looking at a very modest proposal in terms of looking at what options, and we'll see whether we can do a modest building, potentially a modest building with potential add-ons later. We're really looking at being very economical, but still, it is a facility that both requires replacement. At the same time, we do have a reasonably immediate need. We do believe that, given the value that we're thinking about, that we do believe it would be a priority. It would rank highly as a priority. We're currently doing a management plan for Mundy Park, and we're discussing these matters with the user groups, and it's just timely to have this updated. And again, given the value that we're thinking about, I think we identified $120,000, and even then we would see whether that is what we need. We think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. That's great. I'm comfortable with that. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful park. So I just wanted to get clarification. Thank you so much.
Okay. So we'll do the vote again. Council, all in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Your priorities have been shifted.
Next item, item 10, concerns the BC Hydro Metro North transmission study. The recommendation is that Council oppose the new BC Hydro overhead transmission lines through residential neighbourhoods in the city of Coquitlam, oppose alternatives 1 and 3 of the BC Hydro Metro North transmission study because both alternatives will require a future new overhead transmission line through residential neighbourhoods, and 3, authorize the Mayor to write to the Minister expressing the City of Coquitlam's oppositions to alternatives 1 and 3 and new overhead transmission lines through residential neighbourhoods. We have a presentation. We have introductory comments by the General Manager and a presentation by the Manager of Utility Services.
Thank you. The recommendation has been moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Mr. Soong.
Your Worship, I believe I have introductory comments by the General Manager first.
Oh, sorry.
Your Worship, as you may recall, BC Hydro gave a presentation to Council in an in-committee meeting 4 weeks ago on the 8th of March. In their presentation, they outlined the Metro North transmission study to date, and as you will hear it again, there are 3 alignment options, and the purpose of the presentation tonight is to highlight some of the options that could have very severe impact on Coquitlam's residents, so that our focus is going to be on the differences between the 3 alignments. The presentation is by Dana Sung, who is our Manager of Utility Programs.
So, yeah, the 3 alternative alignments
Dana,
of
could you
BC...
pull try to be right in front of the mic. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. The 3 alignments through Coquitlam that Metro or BC Hydro is looking at is in our opinion, doesn't really have long-term impacts on the city, except for temporary construction impacts. For example, alternative 1 is really adding additional 230 kilovolt transmission lines, new wires on existing poles that kind of run from what they call the, not very clear, what they call the Como Lake substation, basically along the CPA rail tracks into Burnaby and into Vancouver through industrial and commercial lands. Alternative 2 is overhead transmission lines, but from what they call the Meridian substation, kind of located near Eagle Mountain Park, heading westward through Amor and ultimately across Burrard Inlet into Burnaby and Vancouver. Oh, okay,
yeah, the backlit screen doesn't work very well with a pointer, so we'll use the computer pointer.
And then alternative 3 is from...
Sorry, can you show us our alternative 1 and 2 again?
Okay, alternative 1 is from what they call the Como Lake substation, which is located at Lougheed Highway and Como Lake Avenue. It's an existing hydro substation, and they're planning on adding additional lines, which is shown in yellow, essentially along the CPA rail tracks, and that goes through kind of commercial and industrial lands. Alternative 2 is overhead 230 kilovolt transmission lines from the Meridian station, which is kind of near Eagle Mountain Park, and westward through Anmore and across Burrard Inlet and ultimately into Burnaby and into Vancouver. And then the third alternative is underground 230 kilovolt transmission lines, essentially from the Como Lake substation along Como Lake Avenue into Burnaby. Again, neither of those alternatives really have significant long-term impact on the residents of Coquitlam. However, if alternatives 1 or 3 is selected, about 5 years after construction of those lines, to reinforce their electrical grid, BC Hydro will need to construct new 230 kilovolt overhead lines between the Meridian station and the Como Lake substation. And if we go to the next slide, oh, I got it. Oops. The actual alignment between the Meridian station and the Como Lake substation is not a straight line. It actually travels.
You have the clicker.
Oh, I got it. Thanks.
He's only an engineer.
We're lucky we're not in charge of the electrical grid. Here we go.
There it is. The actual alignment is not a straight line. It actually is shown in the yellow line. It actually kind of parallels Lougheed Highway, cuts east-west, kind of near the CP rail tracks, and then heads north to the Meridian substation, kind of through the Coquitlam Crunch corridor. It crosses several parks, Daycare Park, Eagle Ridge Park, and Bramble Park. It also crosses or adjacent to 2 schools. So the schools actually have their fields kind of under the existing hydro right-of-way. The existing hydro right-of-way actually has an existing 500 kilovolt line and an existing 230 kilovolt line. What Hydro's proposing, if this alternative is selected, would be a third set of towers and overhead transmission lines along the east edge of the corridor. And right now, that east edge of that corridor is essentially a tree corridor. So there's a buffer between the houses on the east side of the hydro right-of-way and then existing 230 kilovolt line. We can just go to the next image. This is a cross-section of what it currently looks like. The before image is what the right-of-way currently looks like. You can see the 500 kilovolt line to the left, the existing 230 kilovolt line in the middle, and a treed buffer, and then the houses on the east side of the right-of-way. If Hydro installs an additional overhead transmission line, it'll be between the 230 kilovolt line and the existing houses, and then, to prevent damage and impacts to the power lines, that treed buffer would be removed. We think there's numerous concerns with additional overhead transmission lines. There's potential health issues related to electric and magnetic fields from the power lines. There's also this potential for what they call induction shock, which is electric shocks induced by the power lines. While Hydro wasn't or very specific on whether there'd be an increase, obviously the area of that induction shock zone would be increased with additional power lines, and that could impact any kind of recreational uses within the right-of-way. There's also potential loss of property values to the homeowners on the east side of the right-of-way, and also kind of along Lougheed Highway, they'll also have to kind of build a line east of the existing lines, but you'll lose trees which are really within the Scott Creek stream corridor. I guess the best example of recent overhead transmission power lines in the Lower Mainland is Tsawwassen. Back in 2008, BC Hydro upgraded existing 138 kilovolt lines to 230 kilovolt lines in Tsawwassen. They received lots of opposition from the existing residents. In fact, to kind of resolve a long-standing dispute with residents, they actually purchased 104 homes, and they've currently put those homes back on the market to recover some of the costs for purchasing those houses. And the information I've been able to obtain is they've put those houses back on the market at about a $70,000 discount to what they consider market value is. In comparison, this hydro right-of-way through Coquitlam, it's about 6.1 kilometers in length. Tsawwassen was 3.7 kilometers in length. We have over 120 residential properties on the east edge of the hydro right-of-way that are either within the hydro right-of-way corridor or butting up against it. Based on those concerns, I guess staff is recommending that the city oppose any new hydro overhead transmission lines through residential neighborhoods, and for that reason, we recommend that the city oppose alternatives 1 and 3 of BC Hydro's planned project. Okay. The difficulty that actually I'm going to let the speakers list. I made a note to speak first, but Councillor O'Neill and then Councillor Sikora and Zarrillo.
Yes, I remember very well the presentation that the BC Hydro representatives gave to committee on March 10th when they started unveiling what the possibilities were. And to get right to the end line here, I'll say I'm glad you presented this report, because I'll be supporting the recommendation. And if somebody were to look at the minutes of that presentation that BC Hydro gave to the Committee of Council, they would see that discussion ensued about whether a third tower alongside the existing lines would increase the electrical field or currents of induction shock in the immediate area. And I was certainly concerned about the induction shock, because I live close to these existing lines coming down to the heart of Eagle Ridge, and I've experienced some induction shocks, and that's a nuisance, and I was afraid that perhaps with the third tower and more electricity running through there, that this would become more than a nuisance. So these were all really good concerns, and I would have thought top of mind concerns that BC Hydro would be aware of and would have the answer for. The BC Hydro representative did not know. Oh, extra induction shocks because of a third tower. I don't know. We don't know. You know? You know? No, nobody knows. Have they gotten back to us on that question yet? They haven't gotten back to me, and I asked the question. They get back to you? They get back to any of you guys? No. Did they still know? Maybe they still don't know. And on that ground alone, I would say, well, they don't know. Well, we better oppose this. We're not in a position to say, yeah, well, yeah, go ahead and do this when there's, at the very least, that unknown. So I'm so glad that that staff has come forward with this, and that instead of us just saying, oh well, we'll kind of roll with the punches when they come, and then we'll give our feedback when they make the decision. I'm glad that we are going ahead and doing this and letting them know proactively. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. You know, I'm totally opposed about it going through by Como Lake. I mean, we've had those transmission lines there for a long, long time, and there's a lot of power in those lines. I'll tell you, you know, you go close to them and you hear the hums and the, you know, to where you also get a little zap from them and everything else. To add something onto there, I'm totally opposed. I remember years ago, we brought the hydro into the city council chambers to try and explain to us why they couldn't bury those lines under the ground. And it's a very, very expensive project. What they have to do is dig a hole, something that's about 3 feet deep, put a cement conduit, and put them each line in a different conduit. So we would take about 3 different conduits. Very, very expensive, in the millions of dollars. So, but now here comes along, they want to add a little more power and stuff like that. So I'm glad with this recommendation that the staff has come forward. I can support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zarrillo.
First of all, I'd just like to commend and thank our staff here at the City of Coquitlam for taking leadership on this one. Councillor O'Neill alluded to the idea that this utility shared as much information with this council as they felt necessary, not necessarily all their information. So I just can't thank you enough for bringing this forward. And I just wanted to mention that as any new utilities come into our neighborhoods and through our communities, if they want to expand or bring new, that I would just ask for that same level of information, because this is invaluable for council who's not necessarily engineers and don't necessarily have the science behind everything. So thank you so much. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, and the comments, I was going to make some of those. I won't make them. I too have been underneath that power line, most recently on a bike in somewhat damp weather, and I thought, as some of you know, I have an hybrid electric assist bike, and I thought the bike was malfunctioning because I was being zapped every time I applied the handbrakes, and it turned out it was simply the induction from there. And I remember very well the question, and it was a flabbergasting answer, absolutely flabbergasting.
That word flabbergasted, I said, no, people laugh at me if I use it, but.
Well, they would have laughed at you because you can sure deliver words better than me. But I was I was flabbergasted that the answer was, I never really gave it much thought. So I think, and particularly I'm looking at Google Earth here, there's no room for that without actually having the power line almost directly over the backyards of folks on the east side of the existing corridor. I don't think it would have a whole lot of effect on a lot of the Coquitlam Crunch, because it's actually over a part of the right-of-way that isn't used right now other than by the birds that nest in those trees. I think it's obvious that there's a better route. It's obvious that there's a route that's less disruptive and less harmful, less potentially harmful to the people of Coquitlam, and we should be pursuing very hard to make sure that they choose that route over this route, which I think is a non-starter as well. I'm glad that your last slide, which actually showed the actual alignment of this meridian, potential meridian alignment, because it isn't as they describe it. Everyone thinks I think when I was at the public meeting, I think people got the impression that the station that was called the Como Lake Power Station was the one at Como Lake and Mariner, which it isn't. It's the one at Como Lake, well, it's the one at Chilco and Lougheed, down at the foot of that alignment that is called Como Lake. There's a very, very short portion of it at the bottom that's Como Lake, and it goes all the way down to that point and then back up the hill. And that's an incredible route to add another power line to. Even coming up the other way would be quite a significant route coming directly up, but at least there it would be not as close to as many residents as this the proposed route is. So I can't even imagine that they could make that one work, not even counting the issues that Councillor Reid raised when this was first brought, and a couple of other councillors as well. You're going to dig up Como Lake to bury a very significant underground utility for the full length of Como Lake, and then onward it's going to have to be buried through Burnaby as well. But that's all I'll say about Burnaby. This stretch along Como Lake and Coquitlam, that would be an incredible disruption at a time when we're being disrupted for SkyTrain. We've been disrupted on all of our corridors for 6 years now with enormous utility and infrastructure investments, and this one cannot take the route that they're proposing here, in my opinion, and we should oppose it with all our strength. Councillor Wilson.
I would maybe suggest too in the letter that we send that we highlight some of the deceptive information perhaps that they gave us, because the documents that they showed us were not very clear at all, and I think we have a right to let them know that that's not the way they should be doing their consultation.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Well, again, this is a utility, and they seem to end up going wherever they want to. And on this one, I think staff has done an admirable job of getting out and being very proactive on this. And, you know, you talk about the Coquitlam Crunch, there are lots of houses that are on the east side, going up in the back of Lansdowne, and you go up past into Bramble Park. And so if you get zapped now, because that's where I used to walk my big dog and with the little one, but you walk there even on a rainy day and the grass is wet, walking through the grass you'll get zapped. Your ankles feel like they're being bitten by a bunch of little ants or something. So if they're going to increase the voltage from, what is it, 138 to 230?
No, not in Coquitlam. They're adding a new set of lines closer to the homes. They're 230 kilovolts.
So fine. So would that increase the zapping?
It'll definitely increase the zone where you'll get the induction.
But will it make the zap stronger?
I would guess, but I'm not an expert. I would say no.
Because it's really not very fun. And I have had people phone me that have gone to watch a soccer game or something down at Harrier Park, like down at the bottom, and they wheel a stroller in there, and the kids start crying, or they go to the swings and the kids don't want to touch the swings when they're sitting on them. So, I mean, they can't come to us and say they don't know anything about this, because if they do, they can come for a walk with me and I'll certainly zap them. Anyhow, thank you.
So I pulled up two shots. This one's a really big enlargement of a very much bigger photo, but all of the trees on the right-hand side then of the power line would be gone.
So there's houses all the way up there.
Yep. And the next one is a section of that, and you can see how centered the current power lines are, and that the next one would need to be much closer to the houses on the right than the first power line is to the houses on the left. It's I just can't imagine they could fit them.
This is too dangerous for us.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, and indeed, regarding the relative proximity to the homes, my little ruler that I used earlier this evening to measure the distance between the existing westerly tower and the nearest home, that would be a significantly larger distance if this map is according to scale, attachment 3, than the distance between the tower on the east and to the homes on the east. That is a shorter distance there by far. Now, and actually currently the eastern tower is quite a bit further away from the homes on the east than the western tower is away from the homes on the west, but the balance will be thrown the opposite way with construction of a new tower there. According to attachment 3, if my measurement is correct and if this is to relative scale.
I think we're all in agreement here. The motion is to oppose, or the staff recommendation rather, and all in favor? Opposed?
Can we put 2 hands up?
Yes. We're twice as opposed.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Asmunsen to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll now have question period. Are there any questions from tonight's audience on tonight's agenda? Any question on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Just checking online. Seeing none. Thank you all for coming.